Hey there, GameMakers. This is a new update on GameMaker, at least for now on the beta. In a few days it will be officially available for, well, the regular GameMaker users. And here we have kind of an on-top system which is more visual to do particles. In this video, the idea is actually for beginners or people who want to have a little bit more in-depth, more explained video, what's actually happening, what are particles, how we do use the new editor. So for example, this would be, the 101 start version of the editor where you're just spawning stuff on the screen and you can actually place them in the room and then you can, play them. So basically this is what you saw in the very beginning, so you can actually check it out. You would just want to test how your particles are looking like. So no more of, okay, you create your particle system, you code this stuff, and then you have to start your game. Then it looks terrible. Then you once again go back to your code, you change it, you start it, still looks terrible. And this is really cumbersome. But of course, now this will be a thing of the past, because once again, our particle editor, just with a few knobs and things, you can just switch and change it really quickly on the fly. So for whom is this video? Well, for everybody, once again, who is new to the sphere or who wants to have more detailed information what all these knobs and things actually mean. Kind of easy once you do it 2-3 times, but of course at the very beginning maybe a little bit overwhelming, but super easy to do after 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and then boom, yourself, you can do whatever you like, which is the awesome thing about that. So without further ado, if you want to join me on this introductory journey on the new particle system, then stick around. This is OneUpIndie. I am a developer, so if you like what you're seeing and hearing, then why not consider sharing, liking and subscribing to the channel, of course. Alrighty, so just get rid of that stuff, and here we get tons of those things here, as for example placed or being spawned by an instance. But let's start off the easy way and let's go into a room which is a little bit cleaner. So let's go into, get rid of this dude here, and as you can see, nothing in there. This is the idea. I said nothing in there. And then what we do here is, first of all, define, hey, what are particles? So particles are normally a thing which are just spawning on the screen, and therefore the first thing which you need is to have a system. And normally you would code that just and save it in variables and blah blah blah, but now we're having actually a more visual approach, which is once again live in the beta. You can download it and play around with it, or you just wait, I don't know, 2-3 weeks, and then in the newest update it will be a standard to go for, which is awesome. So here you can go under create and then you see particle system, or plus here, then you get those sparkly things, and then you need to understand that this is now kind of an asset class, and once you double click on it, it will open a new tab with, well, the default thing just flying upwards. And then of course what you do, you customize it. So you just have to imagine that each particle system is a container which holds emitters. So normally this is what it is. You got your kind of editor here, go away, and then you have emitters in there, and emitters are actually the core of what's actually happening. So an emitter is, first of all, if you are a little bit familiar with particle systems, I already did a video on the, in quotations, old system. Then emitters are a thing which are emitting, creating particles in a specific area, and therefore you can just press +++, and as you can see, you can drag them out and so on, and you can just create multiple ones and overlap them, and therefore you can create kind of a chained system of things which are instantly popping or just doing a lot of things in tandem, which is, for example, really useful. I don't know, if you have a fire, then for example you create the smoke, maybe the fire at the bottom, and then also embers, and then you could create it into one particle system. This is how it goes. So here, important to understand, and of course you can just toggle them off and on if you want to have them visible, but this is just for the editor. So let's say you created somewhere in the room, it will still play. This is just for you, so you can just check out and do, I don't know, things in separate. So how does then an emitter work? Well, kind of easy. You have to use now the inspector, which you find under Windows, Inspector. And then we do a thing like this, and then you will find tons of things which nope. Let's actually drag out the inspector just for this. Here we go, and just go on the particle system, and then you can actually see you know, a preview, which is kind of neat. But of course we actually want to check out the emitter, which is the important part. So the emitter is holding a lot of informations, and once you are well, kind of familiar what it does, it becomes second nature because it's super easy to use. So most of these things, so color, life, scale, blah 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 blah, are how the particle, this is the thing which is flying upwards, are looking like, how it's, you know, how it's flying upwards, so the movement, the opacity. If you have a counterforce, which is for example gravity, or what kind of color it's having, all these things are being customized in this one emitter. So you just have to imagine one emitter is a container which holds tons of informations, and the first information is actually the old way of what emitters are, because they are emitting particles. And then you have kind of an area, a field, on which it is spawning those things. And as you can see, the bigger I actually make this rectangle is, the more it will spread out, because this is the field where the emitter is kind of doing its thing. So now it's linearly distributing the same amount of particles, but the bigger the field is, as you can see, now it will be scattering more. But of course, if you make it smaller, then they will cluster more. So here, once again, you can customize it the way you like, and it's represented by the numbers here with W and H, which is the width and the height. And of course, if I just change that here, we are changing the numbers, or you can do that with precise numbers if you like, or if you just want to go from one specific point, then it goes 0. But of course, let's go, I don't know, 100 by 100. This is just for visual. Normally, most of the time, it's just on one point. Then you can have those options where you can just have a different color. So let's go with green, transparency. And this is just for you visually, that you see, okay, this specific emitter on this green spot is where the particles are being spawned. So there are tons of things which you can customize here. So the first thing is, how many particles up do we want? And as you can see, the more we ramp it up, the more it will be clustering. So this is quite a lot. Of course, we can go with negative numbers. So let's say minus 10. Then it will be definitely less. So for example, if you want to have just a subtle thing, you can even go with minus numbers, and then I guess this is just a chance of being spawned, and the lower the number, the less the chances that you're spawning one. And then of course here it says mode. So what is mode good for? Well, you can stream this thing, which is then constantly, or you do burst, which is a one-time pop, so like, and bursts are used for visual effects, which are once, and streams are, I don't know, for a fireplace, an embers thing, so things which are constantly updating. So here, these are the two modes, kind of important to understand. And then of course, you got those little things here, not too terribly important, you can just play around. So let's say preview. The preview just says, hey, where the field is, where you're spawning. But of course, if you don't want to see it, then you just disable it or enable, then you don't see it in the editor, which of course is the same as the eye icon here. So as you can see, they are basically the same. And then we can actually also change the position, but most of the time it will be just on one spot. Then important to understand how it's being distributed. Then you got, I don't know, 3 functions, which are linear, Gaussian, and inverse Gaussian. Kind of easy. So let's say if you have the default, which is linear, then randomly on one spot, one or more particles are being spawned. But of course, it's linearly somewhere in this specific field. But let's say you want to cluster them more in the center, then you use Gaussian. So let's say we are making this a huge one here, and then let's actually make quite a lot of particles. Then you can see it's clustering more in the center. But if you want to have it more on the outside, you just go inverse Gaussian, and then as you can see, there's this is less clustered in the center. So these are the things, and of course most of the time linear is good enough, and then as you can see now it's distributed more or less evenly. So this is what the emitter part is. That's basically it's just emitting particles. And now we come to the next thing, which is library. We will go over that in the last part because we actually want to customize how our particles are looking like. So here we got textures, color, life, scale, and so on. And all these points are defining how one of those things is behaving. So what it looks like, how it's moved, what it's actually doing after, you know, it's over. So a lot of things. So the first thing which we can say is textures, and here we got presets. And these presets are just, you know, specific shapes. So we can go for squares or go for stars or whatever. Let's actually clamp that on a lot because they are quite a few. Much nicer, less crowd. And as you can see, you can have different kind of things. And the default one is, I guess it's sphere. These are the presets, but of course, if you just select, but I want to use, I don't know, my crowns, then your crowns are flying up now. So let's actually zoom in. Yep, flying up. So you can actually do some trolly stuff if you like with your own sprites, or you can use it, I don't know, for a lot of things. So for example, you could use it as a pop-up where you just create one spawn, which is just flying upwards. Or you have a stream where you just, well, doing that, I don't know, for a windscreen, or for example, you're opening a chest and then in the background you're spawning those little thingies here. Cool stuff. So once again, you have presets, or you can actually use your own sprite. This, of course, is up to you. Then the next thing, do we want to colorize it? So colorizing is working in 3 steps. At the very beginning, then in the middle part, and then in the end. And then during its lifetime, it's going through here. And then, for example, if you have, for example, different kind of colors here. And now, as you can see, it's going from white, which is no coloring, to blue, and then going back to, well, the regular coloring. And of course, you can do a little bit more, and this is a hidden feature. So let's say you don't want it to be like instantly popping in. You can actually change the alpha. So let's say the alpha is 0 at the beginning, then you will have a nice fading in. So let's say, can we see this? Yes, so they are just fading in and out. And you can actually do the same for once the life has ended, then you're fading in and out. So this is already looking much smoother, but let's actually change the speed. I'm just going a little bit more downwards because the speed is way too high, so we can actually check out the effect a little bit easier. So here, much nicer, and as you can see, already pretty cool effect with minimal effort from our side. Let's actually go back to the colors. You can actually do one thing which is kind of interesting. It's called additive. Additive means that the colors are being blended in with the background, and therefore the lighter the color which you're selecting here is, the more it's blending in with the background. Of course, this has some advantages and disadvantages. So for example, if you want to create, let's say, a fire, then it would make sense that things which are overlapping are more brighter. So here, a pretty cool thing, but of course, this is up to you. So for example, if you want to go really crisp with your art or with a particle, then do it like this. But if, for example, if you say like, hey, overlapping should be a thing, which is great for fog, by the way, then additive blending is your friend. So let's actually leave it like this. Then the next thing is life. Life is being counted in steps. So basically one step is 1/60th of a second. So this is the normal refresh rate of GameMaker. So 80 steps means just it's a 1 second and 1/3 of a second. So that would be the time frame of being alive, and then it just says minimum to maximum. That means randomly it will go between this and this value. So let's say go with 20 and 80. Some will flash really fastly in and out, and some will take their time. And then each particle is giving a value between those two. So this is what that means. Kind of easy. Alive is kind of crucial for, let's say, fast burst effects. So if you want to have a hit effect, then you just like want to go something quickly, then it's roughly 1/3 of a second or even less, because you want to just pop in some quickly. But let's say you want to have a lasting effect, then you go 1 second or even more, depending how long the animation should be. So this is that thing. Then for scaling, this is default set 1:1. This is just meaning, so let's say you want to have, you want to distort the sprite. And as you can see, if we do Y, then we are distorting vertically, but of course we can distort it horizontally also. So if it's 3:1, and now we're having those fat crowns here, which is kind of looking neat. So here you distort it, but of course there's no min max value. This is a thing which you set once, and then all the particles will have this specific scale. Scaling just means how it's being, you know, stretched horizontally and vertically. It doesn't affect the actual size per default. So this is actually done here. So let's say you have a size which is minimum 1 so it's basically taking the size of the sprite 1:1. But let's say you want to have it, I don't know, between 1 and 4, you will see different kind of sizes. And as you can see now that they are overlapping, then you kind of create a mini glow effect on that, if, for example, if you like it. So here it's being spawned, the minimum to maximum value of the size is there, and it's taking into account, well, the scale, because we scaled it up. But of course, if we just revert it back to 1, they will be drawn normally, but of course there are small crowns and big crowns. So here scale is dependent on the actual size which we are choosing. But of course, let's say you want to up it. This version, this one can actually go with minus if you like. So let's say we go minus 0.01. Then what you're seeing is that the things, once they're popping in, are getting smaller. This is great for visual effects where you want it to go away. And this is really, really efficient and really great, for example, for effects where you just want to have like, hey, stuff should, you know, burst out and then quickly disappear. And as you can see, a pretty neat effect with basically 0 to no involvement from our side, which is great. And here we got a wiggle thing. This is, well, you can see it right now. Then it will each step wiggle between their original value and +1. So this will be kind of a thing. So let's make this a little bit smaller. You could create kind of a jellyfish if you like. So this is what the wiggle is doing. It's basically changing the size each time it's updating. So it's kind of nice if you want to have it. But for most things, this is not what we want to have. Then the speed. Here, speed and direction and gravity are being linked, because you need to imagine there's kind of a movement. And at the very beginning, what you saw at the very beginning is that everything was flying upwards, because the minimum and the maximum, I guess, was set to 5. And then, for example, if you set it to 0, then there is no movement. And now we are just, you know, reducing our size, and that's pretty much it. So here you can change kind of the movement if you like. You don't have to. And then once again, you can actually increase the speed. So at the start it was nothing, then it's like we're just jetting upwards. And then of course we can wiggle with that if we like. Can we wiggle? Yeah, so this is then we're wiggling then the movement, and as you can see, kind of an interesting effect. I don't know what is it good for, but I guess it has some purposes, and therefore you can use it if you like. So let's actually make this a little bit more subtle. So there is movement, but not too much, and it's looking good. So let's go for the next thing. Once again, gravity. Gravity is kind of the same as speed, but it is a second counter force. So let's say you want to have movement upwards, like for example, like, I don't know, from an explosion that you are having gravel. But now let's actually use our crowns for that. So let's go with speed, and let's give it 3 and 4, which is kind of high. And then we're just saying like, hey, gravity, and then as you can see now the gravity force is much higher than the speed force at some point, and then it's just pulling everything down. So therefore it's definitely best to make this a little bit more subtle. So as you can see, and now we got crowns which are falling, so going at the very start upwards, and then we are falling downwards, which is pretty cool. Of course here the default direction is 270. You can change it here to a different kind of direction, so that would be going downwards, or you can use this little knob here and you can, I don't know, pull them to the right and pull them to the left. So here your imagination is well, your limit here. But as you say, like, hey, now let's actually change the direction, because what it's actually doing, it's going just upwards. But let's say our start minimum is, let's say 16 degrees, and then let's say 160, and then we are going into an arc, which is pretty sweet. And then if you actually want to have them like 5 to 8, so like gravel, can we? Yes, we can. And then we just pointing that down, maybe change the gravity, make this less strong, and then we're just going upwards, and at some point, yeah, so this could be interesting. So once again, play around with that the way you like it, and then just change the direction. Or for example, you want to have between 0 and 360, these are the max values. Just spawn them in every possible direction, which is pretty cool. And then if you like, you can actually change the direction and increment it. And therefore you kind of have, you can actually create mini twists, tornadoes, swirls, whatever you want to call that here. And then if you like, you can actually wiggle that. Just kind of interesting as a visual effect. So here, once again, play around to your liking, and you can actually create some pretty cool effects with basically, once again, no real involvement. Then the next thing is orientation. Orientation is basically how things are angled. So let's say you want to change, because now their angle is not being changed. So for example, what you can do is give them some random numbers. I don't know, just play around with the dials. 0. And as you can see, we got different kind of angles for all those crowns if you like. And then we got a sneaky little feature, which is relative. And then this is not working correctly. Why is that? Because we're incrementing our speed. So let's go and reduce that. And then now we are flying in the direction and turning the thing in the direction where we are flying to, which is pretty sweet. So here, once again, that is a pretty cool thing. So let's go with 0, 0. And now we should see that the crowns are more or less flying and turning around themselves where they are flying to. So why is that looking a little bit strange? Because in GameMaker, if you have sprites, they need to be aligned to the right. So here, if you want to have the crown to be flying to the right correctly, you need to actually change the image and turn it around, well, 90 degrees. So we can just say like, hey, flip mirror, here we go. And we need to point to the right. And now, for example, once we go back to the particle system, now they are, for example, they're flying upwards, then they are pointing with their crown tip wherever they're flying to. So for example here, and it does look clean right now. And then my inspector is gone. Hello. I love it. All right, so no, let's go into the emitter. And then we did most of these things, which are pretty fun to play around with. So that was gravity and direction. Once again, that thing is pretty cool. For example, if you use it for, I don't know, lines. So now let's say you want to have from a center point lines, and they should go in the direction which they're flying to. And now it looks a little bit chaotic because they are being spawned somewhere randomly here. So let's go with 0 and 0 from one origin point. And as you can see, a pretty sweet effect instantly. and setting the orientation to relative does rotate the particle where it's flying to. For example, if this is then set on off on default, but if you like to have it, swap it on, and then boom, instantly looking pretty sweet. So this is what the orientation is, and of course you can wiggle with the orientation. What is it actually doing? Let's see. So they're basically like just escaping or something. So as you can see, tons of things, and on accident you can actually create some pretty cool effects if you like. And then the last thing is, this is subparticles. Here we come to the part what's actually happening once the life of a particle is off. So should it just disappear and then nothing happens after that, or on death? So basically the particle's life, which is set now to a value between those two, has ended, and then we can actually use another particle. And here what you have is presets. And presets is the thing which I alluded at the very beginning, and you can select it on death or on update. On update just means on each step. Maybe you want to create additional particles, and be careful on that, because you can kind of create infinite loops, because one thing is creating itself and itself and itself and itself, and you could go in an infinite loop if you just save this as a preset and you repeat it all the time. Just be careful of that. So this is what these two things are, and then of course here it's just basically the amount which you would be doing on death. So do I have one? Yes. So for example, on a death you would create a ring, which kind of looks like garbage right now, so therefore get rid of that. So here this is that, and then we go to the thing which I alluded to, which is found under library. So what is that? Well, here you kind of have presets of particles. So basically the whole thing like this emitter, but saved, because for now it's not being saved, it's just, you know, in this one particle system which we created, and that's pretty much it. But the beauty of the system is that you can, first of all, let's actually rename this thing something. Here we go, because it is something, and you can press on S and save it as a preset. So something, save, yes. And then for example you could actually well, check it out and just use it here. So for example, you can now reuse particles, and then for example if you create another particle system, so here particle system 11, double click on that dude, we can actually say like, hey, we actually like to use one of the other particles, and we can actually create it. So here we could link it, I don't know, for example on death, and then just use something here. So once again, you are kind of making mini assets being reusable for other particle systems. So this is the idea behind it, and therefore you could actually let's say copy and paste. As you can see, you can actually copy paste these things out. But then let's get rid of that. You saw something which is this little chain icon, and chaining just means that this thing is unique. So therefore, kind of important to understand, if you unchain it, that means you're creating kind of a copy of that thing in another particle system, which is completely legit, and then in the other particle system you're just changing its values. But if you chain it, so if you just press on that and then save it as a preset, then the other particle system can still take it and interact with it, but once you change it in another particle system, because it's a unique thing, it's gonna get changed everywhere, because it's a one-time thing and not just a copy in the other particle system where you're using. So here once again, this is just I guess then best case is most of the time just unchain it, save it as a preset, and everybody can use it. So this would be, I guess, the best default thing. But once again, as you can see, pretty cool stuff. But now we come to the question, well, that's fine and dandy and so on, but how can we use it? There are multiple ways how we can actually interact with that. So one thing, which is I guess the easiest one, is to have an asset layer. So for example, I don't know, let's go on in this clean room and create an asset. So here you can find it, create a new one if you like, and you can just instantly drag it into the room. And then you see the bling bling icon, and then you can actually press on play animation, and you can actually preview it in your room and see how it looks. And of course, this is a little bit unoptimized, so you have to play with the values so it does look good in your room and so on. But as you can see, already a pretty neat way. You can also use it in sequences, but I'm not gonna go into that because I'm not too well. I'm not the best one concerning how that system works. But hey, here you can, for example, use those things and just place them into the room. So let's say, I don't know, no, come on, we have to be on the correct layer here, and then we check it out. But for example, what we can do, let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this, play it. So for example, once we play it, now we just got the smoke, but what we can actually do is we can rotate it. Yes, so that is pretty cool. Or we can just drag it wherever you like. We can make it bigger, smaller, can we? So as you can see now, it's actually applying the emitter size also to the area on which you stretch it, which is pretty cool. And I guess you can even change the color. So here on the fly and make it, I don't know, reddish or something like that. Doesn't really matter. So as you can see, pretty cool stuff. And on the fly, you can even later on in the level can change it, and therefore you have multiple purposes how you can do this. So this is pretty cool for stuff which you just place in your room, and then they are burst streaming all the time, which is pretty cool. But what about things which are one-time bursts? So let's get rid of that. Well, we can actually, let's get rid of this dude here. No. Here we go. Let's get rid of that dude here. So what about visual effects which are one-time burst? Well, for that we have to be a little bit more creative. We need to, at whatever point you want to have it, create a save, a variable. I don't know, you can call it save system, and then normally it would be part system create, and normally it is actually empty, but here the new asset class can be passed in. So the one on the right side, and then you just say, hey, part system position, and then you would position the particle system in there, and then I don't know, wherever you like to have it. So these two lines are important. The alarm you can completely forget. This is just for me for pumping out stuff. So this is how you could during a runtime create it. Just be aware, first of all, that you are creating more particle system each time you are creating one. And then, for example, if you are, let's say, if this is, for example, being a stream, then it means it will all the time be activated and all the time there. So getting rid of it will be later on a little bit, it's not a hassle, but you need to understand that you need to save it into a variable. I guess best would be, I don't know, an array which you, I don't know, update all the time. And then you can say particle system, no, part system destroy. Yeah, here we go. Then you can just, I don't know, destroy it later on if you don't need it, because it is, once you create it, it's in there. So if, let's say, for example, you would create it here, it's there, for example, even though it would be a burst and then the animation is gone, but still it lingers in memory. And if you do that a few thousand times, I would say this will be a little bit taxing for the VRAM, because even though you don't see them, they are still lingering around in the dark corners of the VRAM, and they're just munching on your, well, your space, your memory capacity, and therefore it makes sense at some point just to get rid of them. So once again, it would be good to store them in, I don't know, some variable each time you create one. And then, for example, if you don't need it, go part system destroy, and then you destroy the whole package, which is this dude here. Kind of important to understand, but of course, for beginners, I would say If you just use it sparingly, you can just get away with it, but once again, not optimal if you make your game and create bazillions of these guys in the room, because they are still around, even though maybe you don't see them. So this is kind of important. So hopefully that was not too difficult. Once again, particle systems, really cool, really great stuff. And now hopefully you see the power of the whole thing. Particle system, new asset class, contains as many emitters if you like. And then we have kind of things which are important. First of all, well, the emitter itself, where to spawn, how many, what kind of distribution, and what kind of field. Is it just on one point or in the field? And then, well, this is pretty much the emitters part. Then library, you can save it as a preset, so all the other particle systems have access to it. Of course, then you can create kind of suites where you have saved those things, and you can just, you know, share it between projects, which is really helpful. And then you can just use and abuse it. And then the rest is basically how the one particle which this one emitter is holding, what kind of you know, customizing does it have, what kind of movement does it have, what kind of shape, what kind of size, and what is it doing after death. And this is pretty much the whole thing. Super easy and convenient. Once you do it 2-3 times, it should go down and be a really helpful tool for using and abusing, well, your particles in the game, which are visual candy and, you know, a good standard for every video game. Alrighty, that was it then from my side. Have a good one. One up indie.